I'll ask you to tell me about the female character who is not Emma Goldman.
Well, right now the female character is named Helen, and she's the writer of the book, and she's working with an artist named, I think at this point his name is Eric. And so she's a woman probably in her 40s, and she is married to an older man who was a political activist, and she has decided to do this, to take on creating a book about Emma Goldman because by using a graphic novel method, because that seems to be what is connecting with the reading public, and so much more difficult to get a regular novel published. And so by approaching Emma Goldman via a graphic novel, she figures that this is perhaps it will communicate better and have a better chance of finding a publisher.
Okay, we're done with that question. Let's move over to your area of work. And when I say work, I mean the type of work that you just talked about, which is more the visual work. Not the visual work can't be done on a computer, but you have a long history of working in this corner.
Yeah, this is the
of your apartment.
Well, this is where I drew my last book, The Listener, and so it was a combination of being here, where I had access to a combination of acrylic paint and watercolor and pen and pencil, and so I did it here if I wanted to have a certain messiness, a chance to be messy and take out the towel and rub things around, and then I would also do basic drawing at a flat table as well, and I also used a light table to do certain things, and so it was kind of a combination of this being the total workspace.
So because I don't know your entire process, I actually I've got a bunch of questions for you. Did you find it really laborious to do sequential art? Did you find that responsibility to make the next frame look like the frame before laborious?
It's a challenge rather than laborious, because you have to maintain a semblance of that the faces look the same in each panel. But I kind of let myself off the hook, and I thought, well, I'll just go for trying to create a drawing that looks good, and if it's kind of like the face, that's maybe good enough. And so I wasn't rigorous in that sense in terms of portrayal. And I think in the book I'm working on now about Emma Goldman, I'm going to be even less rigorous and perhaps a bit looser and a bit more experimental with how I actually portray Emma Goldman, and for that matter the other characters as well. But I guess we'll see. But clearly the restraints around sequential art are you have to do it a certain way, and I kind of want to rebel against that to a degree. I will do it a certain extent, but within my own kind of concept of how I should do sequential art.
So I guess considering your main protagonist, if she even is the protagonist, I don't know how you intend to introduce Emma Goldman, whether she's wandering around through the graphic novel in the streets of Toronto, but she herself was rebellious, so I guess the theme of rebellion, and then if your style of artwork and how you handle the sequential nature, as you're saying, you're going to rebel against it. Is there any way, have you thought about, okay, Emma Goldman rebelled in this way, and so that will be reflected in the way that you rebel as an artist? Do you see any kind of correlation there?
Well, that's very well put. I do feel that there is a correlation to how I will present the work based on how she is, but it's a concept right now as opposed to a practice in terms of whether I can accomplish that. So we'll see, but that is the intention, is to keep her rebelliousness as part of the book itself.
Do you have any ideas on how that might manifest?
Well, I think by telling the story in a way that is at times will be abstract and then at times conventional, I think it will play between that that dynamic, and that dynamic will create a friction in the book that I hope is interesting.
So you tend to you sound like you want to bring a comparative sort of sense of, okay, here's reality as we all accept it,
yes,
and expect to see it represented, and then you're going to kind of jar us away from that in this comparative way.
Well, yeah, it's where the presentation of the book becomes political in a sense and relates to her idea of anarchism, which is what she fought for 50 years, which was an alternative society, and so the artwork in a way should be somewhat reflective of that essence, and so that's, I guess, informs how you would actually proceed in the book, or at least that's the theory of how I want to proceed with it.
Is there any sort of overview that is like for myself, if I tried to set out to do something that was an alternative to anything, I think I'd be immediately at sea, because it seems like everything's on the table. There's no, what is the alternative to? Well, I don't know. I'm just immediately lost even at the origin of the concept. Because alternative used to be to the mainstream, which we now have a million different ways to construct our artwork and to disseminate it, and or not. So what do you think the alternative? Well, let me go back to you, so I don't get the sense that you want to jump in here. So what was she? What was Emma Goldman? What was you say she was wanting to construct an alternative society. So at that time, society was very rigid and kind of almost one-dimensional in its values, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So what was her alternative?
Well, I mean, her whole life would be that she was into, we should have a freer society based around freedom, and so that was in every sort of area, between relationships between men and women, and to worker to employer, to citizen to government. And so she had a radical viewpoint on all these matters, and and she never lost that kind of vision, despite it going out of fashion at times, right? And so all of the same problems that she was facing, we face today, and they haven't really changed that much. And so, again, going back to how would you do this in a book, or how would you be alternative? What would my book be alternative to? Well, that's a very good question, and it's hard to say. I haven't really I don't really have a good answer to that, other than to say break the mold of how sequential art is done, how graphic novels have been handled. But I know that there are graphic novels that are very different from what has gone before, and so I realize that's perhaps a tall order to see, can you reinvent the form? And maybe it's not totally possible, but that's the intention. And so what comes out of it may not break the form completely, but it will be something. It's an approach to making a book, and half the battle is having that idea of how you want to approach the drawing, especially over the course of a few hundred pages. And in the case of my book, I have different story threads that go on in it, and so do you differentiate between each story, or do you just stick to one style? And I'm not at that stage where I've figured it all out. It's still percolating.
What are the things, or the one thing that you are most excited about, or most satisfied with, that have firmed up in your mind, that you're most looking forward to getting down to business on? And by that, it could be particular set of drawings around a certain thing that you've come up with, or exploring a relationship, or whatever. And then the next question, just so this is sort of in some comparative balance, is what are you dreading about getting going past the stage of research? Where I think you're at research, you haven't started the actual script.
Yeah, I'm at research, so through the course of the research, things, visual ideas are starting to come to me as I do the research, as I go, oh, I can see I might handle the scene this way, and so I'm starting to make notes around that, and I'm excited about that possibility of how I will present it. but it's only in bits and pieces. And I guess ultimately the thing that's most exciting, once the research is done, then I will break the text into scenes. And then I will write the modern part of the story, which is the making of the book, the artist and writer who are making this book. And that is in some ways the most exciting part, because I haven't worked it all out. I haven't worked out that part of the story. And the hard work is doing the research and getting what is on the public record, having that in place and having all the research done on that. And that's a huge amount to accomplish. And then the fun part will be to put it all together. So I'm looking forward to that. And what am I dreading? Well, just one always has a certain level of insecurity about whether you can it will be cohesive, whether you will really get bogged down in certain types of drawings, and how much you should be historically accurate in your drawings, and how much that really matters to the telling of the story. So I'm not really sure, but I'm worried about the aspects of it, of the certain technical aspects of drawing, certain things that I don't find that interesting to draw, which are street scenes and buildings, and I'm more into the visuals of faces and gestures.
Am I your editor?
You are, of course you are the editor.
Well, then have no worries. Hey, how about this? What would be your reaction to, how about instead of drawing Emma Goldman over and over again, why don't you have Helen Mirren play the role of Emma Goldman, and then just draw Helen Mirren all over the place instead of Emma Goldman, and make the reader accept that, anyway, just kind of, I mean, you can do anything you want,
That's an
right?
interesting idea, but
you can do anything. That's the thing of, and I don't know, I mean, the thing that interests me when you say the street scenes aren't that interesting is, I'd be interested in testing the reader to, have use eggs in egg cups instead of buildings, and just repeat that over and over again until the reader just accepted that those are buildings, because you didn't want to draw buildings, so you just have rows of eggs in egg cups one after another, and that would be that. Too bad for the reader. They have to endure whatever you want. I mean, you're the cinematic director, and it can be whatever way you want, and they just have to accept that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it brings up the problem of drawing everything out where people don't use their imaginations, and they just see what's visually in front of them, and that's the building, and so they don't have to imagine it or think about it. So this in some ways is the problem of graphic novels, and the same with film too, is that you're presented with something that doesn't require the imagination in the same way that prose text does. So, you just brought up an actually interesting point.
But I guess in a way where these things might even collide, weirdly enough, is in painting, how one could say, once the camera was invented, why do we need realism anymore? Why would anybody consent to even bother looking at realism once we have the camera, and why would somebody want to portray anything beyond, the camera exists, so realism's done.